when it comes to playing a cupcake, I think there's people in three different camps to me when it comes to being the better team in the cupcake matchup. Is there's going to be people who say, they you should always play a difficult out of conference, at least one of the teams. There's going to be people on the other side of it say, I mean, I love playing a cupcake because it means we're going to win big. I get to see a bunch of guys from Michigan, on the field that I typically wouldn't see. And then there's people in the middle that just say, whatever is what it is. Where do you land in that grouping?
Um, I don't mind playing a cupcake for the first week, but I would ideally I like to play a tougher opponent week two. I do think there is value in having a tougher opponent earlier in your schedule. Um, from a testing standpoint, it kind of gives you a gauge on where your team is, uh, how good they can really be, how good they are currently. What do they truly have to work on, right? And if you're special, if you're good enough, let's say even if you do drop one of those tougher games earlier, it does look terrible on your schedule, especially if you run a table the rest of the season. So, um, and definitely taking care of your conference and stuff like that. So, you know, I I, I think about case in point. If I'm not mistaken, I know Shea Patterson's first year. I want to say it was 2018.
Was that Notre
Uh,
Dame you had in that
it
opening?
right. It was opening. That opening game was at Notre Dame, and I would have wished, ideally speaking, that we had that game week two. Maybe and maybe have had Shea in his debut play a cupcake, kind of get a rhythm with his receivers and stuff like that. It may be we would have been more prepared for that tougher opponent the second week of the season. So I definitely don't want a really tough opponent week one, but I do want a week two or week three earlier in the season for sure.
Yeah. To me, I think it depends. I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think it depends on where you're at as a program, right? Are you someone who coming into the season, it's looking like you're going to be one of the better teams in college football, top 15, let's just say. And if that's the case, I think you give yourself some leeway, some runway to have, an easier out of conference schedule, because I think especially with Michigan, the conference itself is going to be pretty good. So it's like it's not as if you're not going to play anybody tough. And I do understand what you mean on, yeah, having that tough out of conference game will definitely test you to see exactly where you're at, because after that game, no matter what, you've got something to build off of. Even if you win the game 28-20, you say, hey, like we see that we're able to overcome the adversity, but we still have a whole lot to clean up. And if you lose, it's almost the same message, right? It's like, all right, you lost, is what it is, kind of got to put it behind you. Here's the things we need to work on moving forward. But I think Michigan's got the benefit that you play in the second best conference, I think, in college football, and you're going to be tested. By the end of this season, we will know who Michigan is. So I'm not gonna go crazy on it. I this is going to be one of the very few years that this happens. Because the scheduling in college football overall is just changing. I mean, the fact that Alabama, who is the kings of neutral site, not doing a home and home, have about 7 or 8 home and home scheduled in the next 10 years, like that shows you how the change is coming of the schedules and things of that nature. So I'm not gonna go crazy. I mean, Michigan had for a long time that one of their out of conference schedules and teams that they were going to play was Notre Dame, and that was a really difficult team to play. And you had them on the schedule just about every year. So it give you some leeway, because on that end, it's like, man, well, we had to play Notre Dame every year. You had a stretch where you had to play Wisconsin seemingly every year when you're in your crossover game. So I think it's about balance. I think they had a stretch where it was a pretty difficult schedule, and now I think things are balancing out a little bit. But it definitely gives you the ability to have your quarterback decision play out in the way that it is. So, I mean, we talked on the phone. I think it was yesterday, but you admit, you mentioned, you said if you had, and I'm not even sure what school we brought as an example, but you basically said if you were playing a top 25 team week one, would you handle the QB decision this way? And my thought is you'd probably handle it the same way you handled last year. I mean, what do you think they would do? And I guess it's a hypothetical, but is what it is.
I don't know. I mean, 100%. I'm 100%, transparent. I don't know. It's just that I don't know. You would think if it was a game of higher stakes that they would have gone with the safer option in K at least to start the season and to say, okay, this is our guy. But behind closed doors, like the competition is still going on, right? And JJ is close on Kate's heels. I don't know because they wouldn't have had the leeway to do this type of thing, right? But then again, maybe Harbaugh does things his way, so maybe he would have kept doing what he did last year and probably brought JJ in for certain packages that they probably worked on or maybe added a couple wrinkles over the offseason. So um, it's definitely very possible. It's just, I guess back to the whole like strength of schedule thing and playing cupcakes. I think the thing for me that I always worry about um, is if your first two games of the season are versus opponents that are so much below you in terms of their caliber and their talent and stuff like that. That when you play a team that may not be as good as you are, but they're significantly better than the teams you played, can you does that increase your chances of being shocked, maybe thrown off balance a little bit, right? And that game is a little bit more close than it should be. Um, Now, case in point, um, there are certain programs that can play weak teams and can be prepared to play in high competition games. Case in point, Clemson. Clemson for years were playing a very weak ACC, but when it came time to the playoffs, they were ready to compete against Bama. They were ready to compete against Ohio State and win a lot of those games. It didn't matter that they had an easier schedule than the regular season because they were that good. So I don't know. Maybe it's not as big of a factor as I may make it out to be, but it is a fear that I have.